Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and waves in their industries. Our guest today has navigated the jungles of war-torn Vietnam and has gone on to become a best-selling international author. His work explores how seemingly small decisions and overlooked details can have monumental impacts on the course of history. And with the recent developments in global politics, including President Trump's on and off again tariff policies and their potential impacts and effects coming up on international relations, our guest's insights could be more relevant now than ever. So we are excited to dive into some of these tiny blunders and discuss how they may ripple out and shape our world today and in the future. Jared Knott, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Nice to chat again with you. You probably get asked this a lot. And you and I were talking about our affection for history, even from the teenage years. But what inspired you to write this second book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters?
Book two. Yes, I'm blessed to say that book one did so extremely well. It's sold now over 30,000 copies. The average book sells less than 500. 90% of the books sell at the resale less than 500 copies. So you get 3 or 4 or 5,000. That's considered very good. And so to sell 30,000 copies, that's about over 27,000 with Amazon itself. Another 26 or 2,700 with the audio box, the audio version with the Blackstone. And then we have the pre-sale going on for book two. And of course, all these excellent sales with the demand. Second book is still some more. You look into history, and there's a treasure trove of goof-ups and foul-ups and mistakes. And so we had a lot more material. So why not keep on going? And
Yes.
It's going to be pre-sale. It's going to be released in March. I think both books, hard to say, I think both good books are very good and very well received. I actually think the second book is a little bit better than the first. And we were talking about, you may want to say, well, okay, give us some examples.
Yeah.
One of actually 3 different examples of the book are situations where the gate was left unlocked or wide open, which led, of course, to the defeat of that particular fortress, which, as you might have mentioned, would happen. And one of the most famous is Constantinople in 1453. And Elon Musk sent out a little cartoon teaser about that a couple of years ago. And it shows a soldier with his helmet on in bed, covers pulled up, a little balloon over his head, showing his thoughts. And he says, "Did I remember to lock that gate?"
Yes.
Of course, the answer is no, he didn't. And so long story short, the Sultan's troops from the Ottoman Empire were able to get inside the wall, and then they would go to the main entrance and open up the main entrance, and then you get the troops flowing in. It was a complicated situation. There were a number of factors. We're talking before the recording began about the huge cannons. They had cannon technology was a process of making castles obsolete. And the Sultan had this engineer who would put together a 27-foot long bombard, which is a cannon that shoots a great big giant stone. He was able to shoot 1.5 tons stone about 1.5 miles, beating down the walls. Well, the defenders, desperate as they were, would do a lot of night work and filling it in. And so that was making some difference, but not a pivotal difference. With also only 7,000 defenders versus about 80,000 attackers. That was a factor. And then the unlocked gate was another factor, which led to the defeat of the Roman Empire. It was the last vestige of the Roman Empire. So you could say that the Roman Empire collapsed in the end because somebody forgot to close and lock the door, a particular gate that looked on to.
Well, I got to say that one of the hiring things they should have looked for is farm boys, because what farm boy has not gotten a hot seat for leaving a gate open I mean, there's certain ways to lose a kingdom and learn a lesson. Wow.
Yes.
So I had a because we were talking about when we were younger and enjoying history and things like that. There was a teacher, Mr. Ho, in our class or in our school. Delightful fellow. Everybody seemed to like him. He had a saying of to err is human and to forgive is divine. And these tiny blunders span the globe. Are there any, just because I was thinking of Mr. Ho, any Chinese dynasty issues that came back to haunt somebody?
Well, it's funny when you mentioned China. It's not a Chinese dynasty exactly, but there was
Okay.
a very important mistake that involved China and also Woodrow Wilson. Way back in 1919, after the Allies had won World War One, all the Allies wanted their slice of the pie. The
Yes.
Japanese had defeated the Germans on the Pacific Ocean, and the Japanese wanted two things for their part. They wanted to be able to take over the German concessions, or in China, a certain part of China was controlled by the Germans. They wanted that to be passed to them. They also wanted, this is kind of strange to the 21st century era, but they wanted a statement of racial equality and ethnic equality inside the Paris agreements, the Versailles Treaty, saying that all ethnic groups throughout the world should be treated fairly and equally, not being biased over the others, special treatment of the others. Well, the 21st century here, all we quote from the Declaration of Independence, that's the easy way. Well, that's the steps. Down in Australia and also in the Western United States, there was a big sensitivity not allowing Asian immigrants to come into the country and take jobs away from the local voters. The senators in the Western United States were sensitive to that. Also down in Australia, there was a very pugnacious prime minister who was opposed to it. Woodrow Wilson, who, by the way, was something of a racist himself, he was very proud of the fact that he's president of Princeton University, that he did not have one single person of color there in the university. Very proud of that. So anyway, he was from my neck of the woods. He was from Marietta, Georgia. So anyway, that's a long discussion footnote. But anyway, he persuaded the other members there at the committee meetings to not give that concession to the Japanese with the statement of racial equality, but to make up for it, he said, the Japanese can't give you your statement of racial equality, but we can give you those German concessions that you asked. Okay, now, real important. Wilson had his 14 points. So his main 14 points was local determination. That colonies, one country could not impose a colony on top of another country. It was one of his main 14 points, one of the main reasons that the Chinese and others were supporting. When that was, date's very important, when it was announced on May 3rd, that the German concessions were going to be given to the Japanese on May 4th, there were demonstrations all across China. That was the beginning of the May 4th movement, which later became the Communist movement. One of the Chinese nationalists said, when this was announced, we believed in Woodrow Wilson and the Western democracies, and then we decided that they were all great liars. So big turning point there, and they rejected the Western democracies. They rejected Woodrow Wilson. Coming out of Russia at that time was a new philosophy called communism. So they rejected the democracy. They embraced communism. Wow. Mao Zedong took over the May 4th movement, took over the entire movement. It took a number of years, but 1949, the communists took over all of China. Well, that was a tiny blunder that led to an enormous disaster. Can you imagine how different the world would be if Woodrow Wilson had just given that statement of racial equality to the Japanese and said, no, you can have the state, but you can't have the concessions. China, South Korea is, of course, a democracy. India is a democracy. Japan is a democracy. China might have been a democracy, except for Woodrow Wilson shooting himself in the foot. Can you imagine how different the world would be? So that's my Chinese story, and I think it's a big.
And perhaps that would have also had a little impact on the Japanese involvement in the Second World War, and perhaps there would have been some better relations. I got to ask you though, what was there a a tiny blunder that really surprised you and stands out as a kind of almost giving you whiplash or having to look at the dumpster fire as it goes past?
Well, kind of following through on the open gate, there are three different situations in history when somebody didn't close the gate or lock the gate. There was
Yes.
one set off it's kind of interesting. There was a man named James Parker, and he was a rather outrageous character. And they had made a deal with the Mexican government to be given a huge amount of territory, and became the Texas government, the Alamo and so on, the center. Anyway, they had a huge amount of land given to them by first Mexico and then Texas, right? A lot of water, fertile ground. So only one problem was right in the middle of it. Comanchera, right in the middle of the area controlled by the Comanche Indians. And so, they built a very strong, well-designed fort, but they decided not to arm themselves. Mad at the Texas Rangers not giving them arms. They were Texas Rangers, so they're not getting arms at all. So they left the gate open to their fortress one day. Now, by the way, what happened is James Parker was a rather outrageous character, and he bought stolen horses from the Comanche Indians using counterfeit money. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, what could go wrong?
Comanche, thank you for all this money. They discover this counterfeit. They come back for revenge. When they come back, James Parker's not there, but the other family members are there. And the gate is left wide open. Of course, long story short, they attack it and they capture young Cynthia Ann Parker, a 9-year-old girl with blue eyes. They take her off, and she now becomes a part of the Comanche tribe. She marries a Comanche chief. She have 3 children. One of them is Juana Parker, who became a Comanche leader chief later. And it's a story. And then John Wayne later played in the movie The Searchers, a John Ford movie. He made a Hollywood adaptation of that whole story. He's searching for the people that were kidnapped from his family fortress and so on and so forth like that. And then Natalie Wood played the part of Cynthia Ann Parker. It's the Hollywood version of it. And John Wayne and Cynthia Ann Parker and so on and so forth like that. But he was James Parker was a very outrageous character, maybe guilty of a number of murders, things like that. And in the movie, John Wayne kind of plays him as an over-the-top kind of character, which is what he was.
I am going to watch that in a new light. And, it's great to give John Ford Coppola a mention. Not too many people think enough of his formative work in Hollywood. That's a big rabbit trail. We don't have to go down the Coppola brothers.
Not necessarily the easiest person in the world to get along with. It's, I don't know, really difficult, but made many outstanding movies. Yes,
that's for sure. So, we're on this history kick, and we can't be off of that without, for discussing your book, I should say, just a little distracted by the rabbit trails. But I wanted to ask, how did you go about researching these lesser known historical details?
Yes, well, we have a great blessing, all of us do, here in the United world. We have a great international library at our fingertips. The internet makes it very, very easy to research many different things. Whereas 30, 40 years ago, you'd have to go to the library, go through the books, hoping that the library had books on a particular subject you were trying to find. Here we have many different sources. You can, my book, one book, two, there's hundreds and hundreds of sources, some of it just for one paragraph of information, some for a large amount of information. And then plus also, I may forget where I put my keys sometimes, but I have a very good long-term memory, and I can remember things that I read 30, 40, 50 years ago, and some of which come forward, that'd be a good story. And of course, I have to do a lot of research on it. It comes forward. Yes. That's, I tell people my mind is a trash bin of trivia. That's where a lot of the stories come from.
Right. Oh, that's great. It makes me think of course, the character of Cliff Clavin, that was always able to give us the little known facts. Now, I'm going to ask you another one about your book. your book does discuss both positive and negative outcomes of these tiny blunders and mistakes. Can you share an example or two of how a tiny blunder led to a positive breakthrough?
Well, yes, I can. And it's one of my favorite stories in history. And it's something that glorifies slums. And my wife would say sometimes that's a category.
Yes.
But anyway, this goes back to Alexander Fleming, back at St. Mary's Hospital in London in 1928. And he had a reputation for being pretty sloppy. And he kept coming messy lap. When he was going to vacation in Scotland for 2 weeks, he had a lot of dirty dishes, petri dishes smeared with bacteria. He decided to run through the counter. And very important, he also left the window open to his sloppy lap. Well, okay, he goes off to Scotland. I hope he enjoyed himself. And he comes back. And now it's time to clean up the dishes. And this is one of the biggest epiphanies in the human race, the history of the human race, certainly in medicine. But a penicillin mold apparently had blown in through the window and landed in the middle, the edge of the middle of one of the petri dishes. And it had killed all the bacteria around it. So he comes back from Scotland, it starts cleaning up the dishes. What is this? It's a white and puffy. There's this clear area around the penicillin mold. Oh my gosh, there's something in penicillin mold that is able to kill bacteria. And that was an enormous breakthrough.
Yes.
It was the experiments and so forth. And we should understand, underneath us, there was a huge war going on. It's very similar to what's taking place in African savannas, lions and so on and so forth like that. There's a big battle going on between viruses and bacteria and molds. And penicillin mold had a certain emission that would cause the cell of a bacteria to burst open. And of course, therefore, they defended itself in that way. And it took a number of years. And also, Dr. Flory became involved, and they did a lot of research, and they find a way of producing it in mass quantities. Penicillin mold on the outside of melons turns out to be much more productive. And they did ways of making it 1,000 times more productive, et cetera, et cetera. But that all came about because our Professor Fleming was a slob, and he's a hero of slobs everywhere.
Gives everyone hope. So I want to ask you, did you discover common threads or maybe some patterns amongst different historical blunders?
Yes, there's in the first book I talk about it was Dusty Weiss was the gentleman's name, and he was a pilot in World War II when the Naval Cross Force worked there in the Midway. They talk about how he went through some meticulous planning, getting ready to get into the cockpit. This checklist, this checklist, this checklist, this checklist. And a lot of times it's just that certain detail, whether it's open gate, whether it's not having a key that you pass on. It's just little details that come in just bite your right arm off if you're not very, very careful. So if you look for one common theme, it would be the devil is indeed in the details. And those people who neglect details do so at their great peril. The Titanic missed the key. They were the transfer of the officer. They decided to replace the number 2 officer on the ship with another gentleman. In the process, somehow he didn't have pass on the key to the locker, and there were the glasses of binoculars that people that crow's nest used to observe icebergs at night was not passed on, so they were doing their work with just the naked human eye. And one of the gentlemen survived. He was testified there in New York later that yes, if they had the binoculars the way they normally would, they could have seen the iceberg much sooner. How much sooner? Well, plenty of time to have gotten out of the way. Whoa. So the whole ship going down resulted from somebody not passing on a key and passing on the binoculars. One tiny mistake, one big blunder. So those details can be extremely.
Yes, details matter. That's for sure. So how has writing this series changed your view of how history unfolds?
Yes, it's this whole research involved here. It gives me a little bit, I'm sorry to say, of a cynical look. That's just kind of history in general.
Yes.
There's I think Ronald Reagan, trust but verify, trust but cut the cards. Well, yes, we trust you. Talking about the Russians, talking about people in politics. We talk yeah, we trust you, but we sure would like to triple check what you told us to make sure you're not lying to us, kind of thing. So people with speaking at the method exercises, things like that, like to give very noble, overarching philosophies. Well, that's wonderful. Well, it's good. Fatherhood of God, fatherhood of man. Okay, fine. That's from mom. Okay, but there's also a nitty gritty, dirty side. You have to be careful. There's lots of scammers out there. Some of them have been elected to office. There's lots of dishonest people out there. Some of them are high positions. And just because a person is in a exalted position, the CEO, whatever it might be, does not mean that their ethics are better than the average person. You can sometimes think that maybe, in fact, John Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, told him that all businessmen, he was a swear word here. He said that all businessmen are sons of bitches. And so that's it's got a dark side that people have to be aware.
Right. So is there a story that from one of your two books that particularly resonates with our current global events?
Yes. Throughout history, you see examples of victory disease. That means things have been going so well, we've been successful once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And there's a tendency in human nature for people to kind of lower their guard when they've had a lot of successes one or the other. October the 7th of 2023, where the Mossad, which had a reputation for being perhaps the best intelligence service in the world, certainly a reputation for being very wise dealing with the Arab world, they were let their guard down very seriously. There were warnings. It's another lesson, by the way, in history, that in almost every surprise attack, you can look back in the days, weeks leading up to it, and there were warnings that it was going to take place. And those warnings tend to be ignored. They say it's kind of human nature where they want to say that everything's fine, everything's okay. I want to sleep at night of internal conversation. Yeah, it's okay. What's been happening on a regular basis and continue to happen, I think worry about. But that was a lapse of security, probably from overconfidence. You call it victor disease. The president of Egypt said that he had warned the Netanyahu government 3 days in advance that something big was getting ready to happen. He also saw people working with those hang gliders, not too far, just an area there. There were indications that something's about to happen. Those indications were ignored, perhaps out of overconfidence.
Yeah. Now, what was maybe the most challenging aspect of writing this second book?
Yes, it was. We have one story that I left out of the first version that I want to add before. I think we're going to add before it's finally released. And so you have deadlines, and you have this story. The story is about Glenn Melton and his disappearance over the English Channel. And that also ties into, though, does the government lie to us? Or maybe a better question is, how often does the government lie to us? Because I think that they knew, real quickly, Ben Miller said it was just a small plane with 3 people, and they were flying to a certain location regarding a concert. And what would happen, the Allied bombers would fly over Germany, and they maybe for different reasons they would not drop their bombs. And so coming back, it was dangerous to land with that airplanes filled with those bombs, so they would drop them in the English Channel. But coming back, there was a small airplane flying underneath the bombers. They were releasing their bombs in the English Channel, and they didn't see it, and it hit the wing of the small airplane, tore the wing off, and it fell into the ocean. So there was a story being circulated that that's when Glenn Miller died. You could say it was a mistake on the part of the Air Force. Well, no. Story came on, that's not true. We did the research. That's not what happened. We don't know what happened to Glenn Miller, but it was not anything like that. But there were 2 members of the crew who 7 years later came out and said, yeah, that's what happened. It was that the timing is correct. The airplane is correct. We did see the bombs blow out and broke the wing off that airplane that crashed in the English Channel, and that's what happened. I think that's one example of us being fed to, and that's not the only time it's happened. If you go back, but in politics, first you just find example after example. No, it wasn't our fault. It was their fault. No, this didn't happen this way. No, we didn't take this way. Just example after example. So I hate to be cynical, but that's the thing we have to be aware of is that it's not a question of whether we get lied to. It's a question of
How often? That's the key. So I want to ask you, are there any historical figures who seem particularly prone at making consequential small mistakes?
well, when you ask the question, the person that comes to mind is I think you can say his name, Adolf Hitler, and he what one thing that happened with him about 1941. He had a Dr. Morel, M-O-A-L-E, who and he gave him a lot of amphetamines and even gave him opioids. Well, of course, you have kind of a maniacal personality to begin with, and you should have that maniacal personality of opioids and amphetamines. And in those periods, Hitler would go into these kind of euphoric, we almost call them rages. He would speak for an hour and a half in front of his people, so around him, and they say, I was going to conquer this, conquer that, so on and so forth. And the worse the news came in, the more his euphoria seemed to get worse. And there could very so he had very rational and intelligent man, of course, and made a lot of good decisions. Right around 1941-ish, he seemed to lose control. And in his book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, William Shirer said that about 1941 he began to lose control, but he didn't know exactly the reason why. But further research, it seemed like the being of drugs. And at the very end, in his bunker, he kicked Dr. Morale out of the bunker and said, give me opioids. He kind of made me realize what was happening with opioids, well as amphetamines. So that may be the reason he made so many mistakes. The decision, wow. You're asked, what's the single biggest mistake in history? Well, I don't exact answer to that, but one items on the short list would be Hitler's decision to declare war with the United States. It was not a certain thing that the United States would go to war with Hitler. We had our own war now if the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Okay, and then it was Germans declaring war on us that caused it to go into war, which it might have been a different world together. In fact, Hitler could have even sent back to the Japanese. Well, these Asians, we don't really like them that much anyway, blah, 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 whatever. We like the Germanic people, maybe the United States, that's another story. But anyway, they did not, it could very well have been that the United States would not have joined England to fight Germany. And that was a huge mistake. There's another mistake I mentioned. He made a lot of after the B1s and B2s, of course, were very devastating. And Eisenhower was driving in a Jeep through Plymouth, which is one of the big embarkation points for the invasion coming up. And he had his son, who was a graduate of West Point, just graduated a few months from West Point. And a young gentleman who was looking around all this massive concentration of gasoline and ammunition and weapons and fruit, all concentrated primarily in Plymouth and some of the other locations nearby. He was saying, well, it's a good thing that we have control of the air because bombers could just go to devastating damage, enormous levels if we didn't have control of the air. I was irritated. Well, if we didn't have control of the air, I wouldn't have allowed this to happen. Well, he was thinking about regular bombers and fighter bombers. He knew nothing about missiles, about the B-1s and B-2s. After the war was over, Eisenhower said that if the B-1s and B-2s had been directed at Plymouth and the other embarkation points, it would have caused the cancellation of the big invasion. Hitler made the emotional decision to drop in London, trying to kill school children, buses, grandmothers, and so forth. Well, vengeance, it was called B-weapons because vengeance weapons. Okay. So she missed an opportunity to completely neutralize the invasion coming from the Allies. It would have been a different war if he had done that. And of course, that now gets complicated, but then the supposed to have been turned against the Russians. You had just one front war, so on and so forth. However, remember that we have the atomic bomb in the pipeline, which would have meant that the atomic bomb was made at off of Munich and Berlin instead of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah. So it could have been even worse for the Germans. The Allies would have probably won anyway. But that was really would have been a different war if he had not made that mistake.
Yeah, that's wild. Just to think of how it is completely true that all these tiny little blunders or foxes really spoil the crop, so to speak. I would like to know, how do you hope your readers will apply the lessons from your books into their lives?
Yeah, when you pass the midpoint in your life, you think that maybe you have some wisdom, you can pass it to the younger folks. So just listen to us. We have some pearls. Again, back to what we talked about before, people should become successful by being known for being very detail-oriented, very dependable, and very professional that way. Dolly Parton has a word she calls, she's going to call professionalism, professionalist. And she's always 15 minutes early to her meetings. She's always learns everybody's names that they're very careful to be very reliable, dependable, doing what she says she's going to do. That sort of thing is important. And of course, attention to details that can be so critical in many situations. So I'm hoping that young people see all of these horrible outcomes from people not paying attention to specifics and details, and learn from other people's pain. I'm not let that happen to me. Let me earn that reputation of somebody dependable, reliable, and very, very conscious about tiny details.
Right. Yeah, I had an accountant many years ago who told me, Michael, if you take care of your nickels and dimes, the dollars will take care of themselves. So it's that attention to detail. So, Jared, how can people get in touch with you or pick up a copy of your 2 books?
Yes, please go to tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. So when we go to tinyblundersbigdisasters.com, we have 2 free chapters there. We also have, my favorite part of the book is the portrait gallery with 27 personalities and a little bit of dirt on each one. Not really each one, so it's a good thing about some people. Yes. And also a book trainer there is a fun place to visit. And you can get a sense of how well you like the book, and it's available, of course, in paperback as well as the electronic version. And it's a fun place to visit and a fun book to read.
Yes. And I will say the artwork, ladies and gentlemen, is worth the price of admission alone.
Go ahead. The second book even has more artwork in it than the first. And so of course, you'll see the book cover there as well. But it's fun to read and research. It's fun to talk about. I think I get a lot of feedback from people that have read the book. One of them was from a lady. She had a friend who's going to prison, he's going to be incarcerated. And so she gave him a book to have something to read. He really liked it. He passed it around to the other inmates there at the institution. They all really liked it. First, they may have related to it in a special way.
Yes.
Tiny blunders leading to big disasters.
Jared, thank you for your time and sharing your experiences and your books with us today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it as always. Thank you.
It was a delight. And thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you being here. And we also appreciate when you share these episodes with your friends and families. And I know you have that one person that you're thinking, oh yeah, Jimmy, he would love this conversation. So share this episode and send a link over to your friends and family, and even those you don't like, because this may keep them busy for quite some time. So thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm Michael Klassen.